today's day, electronics have seemed to become man's best friend. And to protect these electronics from unreasonable search and seizure and the Fourth Amendment is important to people like you and me because of an exponential increase in smarter technology.
This topic is important today because of a surge in better technology that can make the Fourth Amendment a controversy. Law enforcement and the government have been infringing on the people's Fourth Amendment rights, and now with the recent terrorist and criminal attacks, electronics can hinder the prosecution of criminals. This is also making people lose their unreasonable search and seizure rights at the same time.
A good example of electronics coming into conflict with the Fourth Amendment clause, unreasonable search and seizure, is in the Supreme Court case Kylo v. U.S. in 2001.
In Kylo v. U.S. in 2001, the court addressed the constitutionality of using technology to survey the inside of a defendant's home without actually entering the home. Here, the court held that physical invasion was not required to constitute a Fourth Amendment search if the surveillance reaped information that would have not been obtainable without entering the home.
My name is Danny Lee Kilo, and I'm growing lots of pot. But because I keep it all inside my home, I'll never get caught.
We're outside Danny Kilo's home. We want to raid his home.
Well, do you have a warrant?
I could, but I don't. It's okay. I'll get probable cause now. Look, I see some evidence of drug grow lights over there.
I don't see anything over there.
Are you using a thermal imaging camera?
Nope. Those things aren't that common. Most people don't have one.
Whatever. Let's just raid him now.
The reason Kylo v. U.S. is unconstitutional is because the police use a thermal imaging device to obtain evidence inside of a criminal's home in order for them to obtain a search warrant for his arrest. Although this breach of privacy is unconstitutional, on the other hand, it makes it extremely difficult to catch criminals when they obviously know when they are guilty of a crime.
There are a lot of different technologies that come into conflict with the Fourth Amendment, and one of them is something that we use on an everyday basis: phones. Cell phone records are a good way to see the movements and locations of people, and if someone were to do something illegal, a good source of evidence would be their cell phone records. Like in the case Carpenter v. U.S., after a series of armed robberies and acquired cell phone from the FBI by one of the perpetrators, the government, under the Stored Communications Act, gained access to the criminals' phone numbers, and with this, they arrested one of the perpetrators, Timothy Carpenter, for the offenses that occurred.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court, at issue in this case is the government's warrantless collection of 127 days of petitioner's cell site location information, revealing his locations, movements, and associations over a long period.
Although they never obtained a search warrant, they were still able to search his phone records and use his geolocation to prove that he was guilty for the crimes. The no unreasonable search and seizure clause comes into question here, as Timothy Carpenter argued the government's cell site evidence on the Fourth Amendment grounds. As the case is pending, we see how the government's use of search and seizure of the cell phone records as evidence without obtaining a search warrant is breaching the private locations and movements of citizens.
It might only seem like a one-time thing, but the Supreme Court cases Carpenter v. U.S. has caused the Supreme Court to re-examine the rights to digital privacy. According to an article written in Business Insider, the Supreme Court is ruling on a court case that could possibly change the digital privacy rights altogether. The ruling on this case will determine if police need a warrant to access geolocational data from a person's cell phone. If this case is lost, we could be living in a version of the United States that is closely watched by the government, similar to China.
Jeffrey Rosen, president of the National Constitution Center, weighing in on the digital privacy case of the 21st century. It would mean that we would have no private spaces in which we record our most intimate thoughts, our criticism of the government, our hopes, and our fears. It would mean that Americans aren't as free today than they were at the timing of the framing of the Constitution.
The government and some citizens may think this will be a good thing for America, but what happens after you lose your privacy? Then you lose your freedom, and America, being the land of the free, doesn't live up to its name anymore.
Imagine living in a country where virtually almost everything you do is being watched by the government, and it seems like Americans' right to privacy is turning into something with really no privacy attached.
Due to this, that's why we believe our electronic possessions should be protected by the Fourth Amendment due to advancements in technology in the 21st century.